Welcome to the Free Flowing Health Podcast, where we invite you to embark on a transformative journey towards a healthier, happier, more fulfilling life. Each episode brings you a dynamic exploration of the diverse aspects of health, wellness, and healing. I'm your host, Lisa Brown. Join me as I engage in intimate conversations with inspirational guests who share their unique stories and insights. These conversations will take you beyond conventional thinking, encouraging you to break free from the constraints of a one-size-fits-all healing approach. Our mission is to empower you with the knowledge, tools, and motivation needed to inspire real change. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Welcome back, everyone, to the Free Flowing Health Podcast. Today's guest is Hesron Gomez, based out of Texas currently, originally from California. And today we're going to be talking about a rather taboo topic. Lots of people, as they go through their life and journey, eventually, end up with some sort of addictive behavior. And sometimes it proves to be a little bit bigger of an issue than not. So either way, this show is all about just allowing people the safe space to share their stories in a non-judgmental way, with the hopes that their struggle and how they found healing can inspire others to find their way, out of whatever it is they're struggling with, whether it be an addiction or a health issue or condition or whatever it is that the challenge may be. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lisa. Appreciate the time.
Yes. So I guess we can just take it back to the beginning. And if you just give the audience an overview of who you are and, how you grew up and what your home life was like.
Yeah. So I'll try to be as brief as I can. Okay, because man, like right when you can get somebody to speak about themselves, right? They could go on for hours. Um, but yeah, so I grew up in the Los Angeles area. There's this area called the San Fernando Valley. It's the north part of LA. And there I grew up in Canoga Park. It's like, small city, like close to the most north part of the valley there. Um and I grew up in a obviously, by the last name, probably people would guess that I'm Hispanic, right? And my parents both are from El Salvador. So Hispanics usually tend to be a little bit conservative in the culture. But on top of that, I grew up in a Christian home. My dad's a pastor since I can remember, right? Um, and on the whole Christian spectrum, right? You have a spectrum within Christianity is like, some more liberal, some more conservative. I was like on the more conservative side too, on top of being, with from a Hispanic, conservative family. And yeah, I mean, things that I can appreciate from that is like, having high respect for other people, right? Um, Knowing that there there's there's just an innate value to a human because we are a creation of a God, right? We're a special creation. And so those are things that I still hold true to myself today. Um, but where it made it challenging is that, that there's beliefs that start kind of getting challenged by just being in an environment, a social environment that's not necessarily all, equal, or we don't all see this eye to eye on things, right? So from the very beginning, um I find myself challenged, right? In LA, there's just so many distractions uh, that are put out to you like on a constant basis. And and those things we're not necessarily prepared to fight when we're kids, right? Like they were my parents were teaching me like the foundations of our faith and what to believe. And then in a certain way, like when you get into like the whole religion talk, there's a certain way that you're supposed to look, there's a certain talk that you're supposed to talk, there's a certain way that you're supposed to walk. And all this stuff is what I'm picking up, right? What I'm not necessarily being trained for is to how to deal with these challenges from a very genuine, sincere point of way or point of view. Um, And yeah, so again, just to try to cut it short a little bit. Um, at the age of 12, I was in seventh grade, Lisa, when I was first exposed to pornography. And I remember like if it was yesterday, even though it wasn't yesterday, uh, that I was looking at my buddies down the hall, and they were all huddled around one's locker room, or his locker. And I was like, well, what's going on over here, right? So I head over there, and sure enough, like it's one of my buddies, and he has a bunch of magazines that he got from his older brother. You know, his brother was over 18, and he had him in his room, and he snuck some out in his backpack, brought him to school, and we're all wowed by, by what we're
Which
seeing.
is pretty normal at that age. I'd say that like if you talk to most 12, 13, 14-year-olds, that's probably around the time that they discovered some sort of pornographic material, whether it be through a magazine or the television. Wouldn't you say that's like pretty normal time to like begin to discover these sorts of things?
I mean, so it seems like that's kind of like what's going on. Like that's the trend,
Right?
right?
Yeah.
We're right around 12. It seems like now it's getting a little younger and younger, sadly.
Okay. Yeah.
What is normal, Lisa, is that
Yeah.
right
Right.
around that
Right.
age we're hitting puberty, right?
Mhm.
So our hormones we're going through this hormone change that that again, when we're not necessarily prepared to be able to have these conversations,
Right.
we could make this stuff like super bad, like, oh, it's like, uh most people would say, oh, there's some sort of problem with like looking at pornography at such a young age. Some people would be totally okay with that. But we for sure make it of the devil when we're not properly trained and to see what's going on, right? Like you're hitting puberty, obviously you're gonna, the attraction is gonna start coming, right? And these images are gonna have an impact on you just because you're at the ripe age, right? So instead of gearing people in the right direction, sometimes we make it more evil than what it really is, right? Like
Right.
where I'm coming from as a male kid hitting 13, right?
Yeah.
Um, but nonetheless, this happens. Um, I'm not sure. Again, when this first happened, Lisa, I'm not sure if this is right or wrong. I mean, I know that I like what I'm seeing, but I don't know if it's right or wrong. Um, but just because of the very conservative environment where I'm growing, I don't I don't feel like there's necessarily an open door policy where I could come and say, "Hey, I just saw this." Like, and I felt this, like, what do I do? What do I do with this? Like, I start, so in a way, I kind of knew it was wrong, right? Just just out of intuition. Like I had
Right.
a feeling that this was not appropriate. Let's call it like that, right? Um, so I don't speak about this. More and more friends start sharing this stuff because in my home, obviously, I there's it's not around. And but it is at my buddies' places and stuff like this. Well, the thing is that, this was middle school, so by the time I hit high school, this is the time where everybody's getting a computer at their house, and internet,
Hmm.
even though it's dial up, it's still available at everybody's home, right? Um, and so that makes access to this kind of material a little bit more accessible. And oh, I forget I'm on your podcast. Sorry. I know that social media right now is having a big thing with like the words, right? But
Hmm.
yeah, pornography is becoming a lot more available because now it's in everybody's home. Whereas before, I had to sneak around the liquor store to be able to get a peek at the section, right?
Right.
Um, and so, you know, it at that point in my life, Lisa, it just becomes this little thing that I have hidden that I feel it's bad, but I can't talk about it. Like I'm not opening up about it, right? And yeah, and that's what it is. Well, when it becomes more accessible, what I, now, like in retrospect, what I start seeing is that me naturally as a person, like my character, I hate conflict. Like I hate like being able to speak to someone about an issue that I might have with that person. Like I'd rather just not talk about it and be in my comfort zone, right? And so when I'm confronted with these type of issues, um I see that this is kind of an escape route, right? And just because again, my upbringing, um I so my dad was about to play pro soccer in El Salvador when he was younger.
Ooh,
So he's big into soccer. And so he taught me and my brother how to play soccer since we were really young. And
really football, not soccer, right?
football, yeah, yeah. For the rest of the world, right? It's
Yeah.
football. And so he taught us how to play since we were like really young. And I really enjoyed the game, and I was pretty good at it, right? But the thing is that then like the next step for me, around the same age to 12, 13 years old, was to start getting into club teams. But the problem with the club teams is that they had games when I had to be at church, right?
Okay.
So that imposed a problem there, and that kind of limited my soccer or my physical activity in that aspect. Um, so around this time, Lisa, just to kind of tie it to like your overall message of being living in a healthy environment, right? Like we know that movement and exercise is super important for a human, and I don't have this because again, I had to stop it. And so this is just a very easy way to kind of let out
Hmm.
a lot of things. Well, I know that we're gonna have people listening from different points of view, different worldviews, and I respect all of them, right? But I think that as humans, we might share a lot of these emotions. And in life, what I've seen is that sometimes whatever our belief is, we're on fire for our faith and what we really believe in. And then at other times in life, there's just things that happen, and we kind of start going on a little downhill from there. And we kind of don't even know where we're at, right? So when I'm gonna call it like this, when I'm on fire, right, for my faith, I don't have a need to go to this stuff, right? Um and it's not present in my life. But when I go on those dips, um that's when I start noticing that I'm recurring to it, right? And because again, it's just an easy way out.
The question
Y-
is, so you discovered this pornography at the age of 12, and then you dabbled, and then it became more accessible, and then, over time, now you're in high school. When did it progress or evolve into the place that you deemed it to be an addiction or a problem? Just to paint that picture before we dive a little deeper.
yeah, thank you for that question. So it's happening in high school. It's happening
Okay.
in high school, and it's not in high school. It was more of a curiosity, right? Just
Okay.
keep exploring. And the thing is that the industry, Lisa, is really I mean, they know exactly what they're doing, right? Because obviously, I don't have a credit card at the high school age or a bank card, so I'm not paying for any subscriptions, but it's all available and it's all for free, right?
Yeah.
And the idea is to provide this free stuff so that you could get basically to become a paying client, right? And so it's all at this point is just very much exploration. But what we don't realize, and this is why I wanted to come and share this on your show, is because it is a holistic problem in the sense that we don't really understand that the habit that it's getting created is something that's getting ingrained in
Mhm.
muscle memory, in my body memory, like what I'm feeling with like the endorphins and everything that's happening in my brain. There's a memory that is getting stored. I have no clue if this is happening, right? I mean, I'm
Right. It's a
16.
physiological response with the dopamine and the neurotransmitters, and just like if you were going to take a hit of cocaine, and you can liken this to any addiction that
Yeah.
that we constantly return back to. It's that sensation, it's that feeling, it's that thrill, or even doing it in secrecy because of the shame. And then there's also that thrill seeking sensation as well that goes along with that. So whether it's whether we're talking about cocaine or porn or food or, anything under the spectrum of things that we can get addicted to, it's very similar how it affects the brain and the body. And like you're saying, living with inside of you. And it is like a holistic perspective of how your mind, body, spirit, becomes so acclimated to that, constant thrill, so to
Yeah,
say,
yeah, very
Yeah.
much. And
Yeah.
and so this is all new to me. So I'm like diving like head on because this is so exciting, right? And again, like that, that little piece to the puzzle is very important. That the thrill of, hey, nobody's watching me, even though in my faith, I know that somebody's always watching me, but I feel like nobody's watching me and I'm keeping this a secret and whatnot. Yeah, it's all adding to the sensation and the experience, right? But again, so a little bit past 16, that's when I start getting a little bit more serious about my faith. I started asking some big questions for myself about what I believe and I don't believe. And I come to realize that no, this is what I really believe myself. It's not just because it's imposed by my parents and whatnot. So I'm choosing to walk this path. And and this is not congruent with this path, right? So again, when I'm on fire, like I'm able to kind of like put this on the side and it's not present, right? But when those little downhill moments come and you need something to lift you back up, now that I'm speaking to you, like I'm just kind of putting things together as I'm talking to you right now, is that hey, this can bring you back up real fast, right? So that's kind of what's going on my life for the next, I don't know, 10 years or so. Um so around I was 21 when I met my now wife. She's obviously we dated for about 3.5 years. And during this time, porn is not really present in my life. I'm on fire on my faith and I met this beautiful young strong character like of a woman and really smart. And I'm just like head over heels, right? Like there's no need for this. Um, but I'm sorry. Hold on. That's true, but not the whole way. Okay.
Okay.
So um my wife Carla, she was from Mexico. Okay, so she's in Mexico. So we have kind of long distance relationship thing going on. And the first part of our relationship, I mean, everything that I was making, it was just to either be in touch with her over the phone or fly out there to go see her. So like just the very first year that we dated, I mean, I think I went out there like 8 times. And so
Wow.
I spent a lot of money to keep that relationship going. Um, but then this is where like 2007, 2008, so we got that, big financial crisis and whatnot,
Yes.
and I got laid off. And um so there was a little moment there where I struggled and it was hard for me to get out there to see her. I couldn't talk to her all the time because there was no free calls to Mexico from T-Mobile at that
Right.
time. And you had to buy calling cards and all of this stuff, or it would be very costly. Um, so our relationship is now, I'm feeling a little conflict with our relationship, and it's not something that's necessarily I feel like it's in my hands yet. So this is when I kind of start again bringing the bringing this little easy way out of the way that I'm feeling. I'm not feeling good, so let me feel good, and I'm bringing porn again, right? Um, I don't tell my wife this, right? I don't tell my
Yeah.
girlfriend this, that I have this problem or that I'm doing this because again, like nobody else knows, so why does she need to know, you know? And I'm sure that it'll just go away. Well, fast forward, we're married. Everything's great. Porn's not present. Um, but then we have our first child. Um, and our first child, one of the reasons why I felt like Carla was going to be such a great wife was because I knew she was going to be a great mom. Just the environment, like how I saw her. Um, with her own family. Like I knew that I wanted that for my own family too. And I knew she was going to be a great mom. What I didn't know is how I was going to feel about her spending so much time nurturing my firstborn,
Right.
right? Like all of a sudden I start feeling like I'm second in line. Um and and I don't know how to deal with this. And again, because in my nature, um um I don't like conflict. I didn't bring this up to her, right? So the by this time we have these devices that now makes it super accessible,
Oh yeah.
instantly available, right? And I could do it wherever and whenever. So um it was the easy way out. And because I didn't deal with my conflict with my wife, right? Um I just kept going to the easy way out, right? Which was diving into pornography. But just like drugs, so there's a there's some really good resources out there nowadays that there are even they're not related, they're not affiliated to any type of religion or church or anything like this, um, and they're bringing a lot of information out about what pornography is doing, right? And it's considered basically like a new drug because they've done
Mm-hmm.
studies where um, they've observed brain activity in someone who's addicted to porn and is watching it on a constant basis, and they look at somebody who's doing hard drugs and the brain activity is
Exactly.
exactly the same, you know. And just like dopamine starts waning off on some of these drugs and they need to go to a harder drug, the same thing happens with pornography where a lot of people get introduced to it by just what we would consider like a normal encounter, sexual encounter. But then the industry knows that this happens, so then they start providing more hardcore stuff and just different things because we're all different, right? So people have
Right.
different needs and different likes and whatnot. So the industry knows it, so it starts putting this stuff out. Well, um, without me necessarily being conscious of it in the moment, I start diving into some of this stuff, right? Like the hardcore stuff, and just again, exploring because I want to get out of my reality, which is I'm not where I was with my wife. And I'm feeling bad that I'm feeling this because she's a great mom and because my daughter, like who I love and I want nurtured by my wife the way that she's nurturing her. I feel like it's you know um making me feel bad, and I'm just I don't know how to deal with this, right?
Right.
So again, to cut the story short, um the progression goes out into you know basically, Lisa, for me, this would take me to La La Land, and La La Land for me was better than my reality because again of what I was feeling, right? Like those in the dopamine, and um, just having an escape, right? So that wasn't cutting it anymore, right? So now, like this whole having it hidden thing, now it's me having conversations with people outside my marriage, right? And that starts creating this fantasy to bring me to La La Land. Oh, what if I can have something like what I'm looking at in these images and these
Yeah.
videos with some of these people that I don't know in person, right? But I could just start fantasizing about it. Well, it it escalates to the point where I am unfaithful to my wife, right? Um, and now I don't recognize myself, right? Because morally, for me, that's a big no-no. And like marriage for me is something sacred, and I've just shattered that, to pieces. Um, in retrospect, I mean, I could tell the story that I'm telling you right now and I'm sharing with your listeners, but while it's happening, like I don't even know how I get there, you know? But it's a big wake up call for me. Because
Was there like a particular moment that you had that aha awakening that really set you on a path towards healing? Was there like something that stands out?
yes, yes. So I'm at church. Oh, Lisa, and just to add a little bit to spiciness to this story. Um, so all this is happening behind closed doors, literally, like bathroom was where most of this was happening, right? Um, and that's kind of common. That's why I wanted to throw it out there because if
Yeah.
someone's suspecting something, it's probably behind the bathroom door. Um, and but anyway, so I'm still involved with my church. I'm a very curious person, so I kind of look into things very thoroughly, and but that helps me basically, you know, be able to hold my faith and be able to explain it. And so I started teaching at church, and I'm teaching like almost every other weekend. Um, and nobody knows that this is going behind, right? And it almost seems, Lisa, I don't think this was ever necessarily said verbally, but it seemed like very much like I was kind of like getting prepared and groomed to be like the next pastor for my church,
Uh,
right? But then this happens. Um, but hold on, before that. Um, so I'm at church. And for whatever reason, I just open my Bible up and I land in a book called Proverbs. And more specifically, it's Proverbs 28, and I'm reading it, and I hit the wall in verse 13. And verse 13 says, "He who conceals his sin will not prosper, but he who confesses and deviates from the path will find mercy."
mm,
This was after the infidelity that I'm seeing this. So obviously, like I know that I'm looking for mercy. I need mercy. I need to be reconciled with my wife, one way or another.
mhm,
But just like I'm not able to speak about the porn problem with anybody, let alone such a big whale like adultery, right?
mhm,
And so at that moment, I knew that I needed to tell my wife, right? And like that little, how could I put it? That little equation that I found, that little formula was confession and deviate from that path that I was on, right? Would equal mercy.
mhm,
So I had tried deviating before and it wasn't working by itself, right? Um, but the confession part, that made my knees tremble. And so I knew that I needed to work on that. Um, sorry for that long pause, but I don't know. Again, thank you for the space. I don't know if this is gonna help anybody. Um, I
I'm
didn't
sure
have
it
the
will.
courage. I didn't have the courage to tell my wife. And I remember, Lisa, I was I had just read um Miracle Morning, The Miracle Morning.
Mhm,
It's a really great book. It talks about how to prep your morning, right? So you could have a good day and hopefully those days produce a good year and good life. Um, well, and obviously in that book it talks about good habits, like, forming good habits, and I knew that I needed good habits in my life. And part of it is to wake up a little bit extra early to put in the work that you need to put in, right? Like the exercise and meditation and prayer, whatever you need to do, right? Um, and so I was trying to start something like this, right? So I'm up before anybody's up here in the house. It's still dark. And I knew that prayer was important. And I didn't know if I was getting hurt or not because of where I was at, because I was concealing so much, right? Um, but I remember, Lisa, that on a on this one day, and I don't remember, I think it was on a weekend. I saw my wife and I'm like, today I'm gonna tell her today. Today's the
But
day.
at this point, how long had the infidelity been taking place? Was it a couple months, weeks, a year,
Yeah, it was a few months. It was a
a few
few
months?
months.
Okay. Just to
Yeah.
give it context. Okay.
Yeah, it was a few months, and
And with
I
multiple people, we don't have to go into details, but was it just, at this point, was it multiple people or just one person?
so it had happened with multiple people, but at this
Okay.
time it was just with one person.
Okay.
And yeah, so I saw my wife and I knew that I had to tell her, and I said today's the day. And within me, like I felt the conviction that that day was gonna be the day that I told my wife. But the day passed and I couldn't get around to it, right? So this other day was on a Wednesday, and I'm up at, I think it was 5 in the morning or something like this, and I'm in the living room floor on my face, just crying out to God and telling them, you know what, I'm a coward. I don't think it was a coincidence that I landed on this verse, and you're kind of in your way, you're telling me what I need to do in order to be where I want to be and where I need to be, but I can't go through with it, right? Like I told him, like you know my heart, you know that I had made a decision that I was going to tell her, and I couldn't tell her. I'm a coward. I cannot tell her. You need to help me. I don't know how. You need to give me the strength, or something needs to happen, right? But this is where I'm at,
Like in
and
a
I think,
complete surrender almost, right? Just a complete surrender. If I can't do this, please find a way for this information to come forth so that I can, begin to transform it and then deviate like with getting the help that I need, basically. So
yeah,
just you're in pieces, you're on the floor, you're in shambles, you've reached that breaking point, and you want to confess and come clean and be able to move on with your life. So then what happens?
yeah. So it's definitely complete surrender, and at the same time, for the first time, being completely transparent
Hmm.
with the one being that I've known all along, that's knows like the depths of my heart and my mind. But for some reason, even with him, I'm trying to put a front up until this point, you know? So now I'm just completely open, completely naked, right? Just like he created us. And there's no more fronts. Well, that weekend, um, I, I think it was Saturday onto Sunday morning. I wake up and I see the light to the bathroom door on. Um, and I'm like, okay, so Carla's in the bathroom. And I'm trying to go back to sleep. And I don't know. I don't know if I went back to sleep or not, but it felt like a little while and I'm still kind of tossing and turning and like, wait, the light's still on. I'm like, what's going on, right? This is not normal. So so I get up and I open the door and she's just bawling with my phone on her hand.
Mm.
And yeah, she found out through my phone, through stuff that I thought that I had thoroughly deleted and made sure that she was never gonna find, if
But your prayers in that moment were answered, right?
correct.
Even
Correct.
though it probably felt like the worst moment of your life, in some sense, this was happening for your highest good, for your family's highest good, and just to help support you on getting the help that you needed.
Yeah, yeah. So at that time, Lisa, at that very specific time, my dad had just moved over from California to Texas, and he was staying with me while
Hmm.
he got situated. Um, so obviously, Carla says, um, "Hey, I want the truth, and I want the whole truth." And that's precisely what I saw. I'm like, okay, this is God answering my prayers. Like I couldn't do it by myself. He got the conversation started, right?
Hmm.
Now, when she says I want the whole truth, I could have kept stuff, right? And I tried. I'm not gonna lie, like I tried to keep like little details that I thought we're just gonna be more hurtful or this and this and that. But now I could tell you it's more hurtful to keep details from someone that's on the receiving end of infidelity, right?
Mhm.
It's a lot more hurtful because you're doing damage to your credibility. I mean, your trust is already broken, right? Like she found out that I had uh committed this, and by just keeping stuff, I'm just adding to that fire, right? Of resentment and and anger, like so I quickly learned that I did need to be 100% transparent with my wife too, and she needed to know every single detail. Um, that very morning, so this was like at 3 in the morning. That very morning when it was time to get up, first thing I did was knocked on my dad's door, and I told him. I told
Mm.
him also. I told him about the adultery, and I told him about how it all had started, how I had been keeping secrets since I was a teenager, and and I know that my wife is obviously in grief and going through a really hard moment. But me, like personally, I'm feeling liberated for the first time.
Right. The floodgates were opened.
Yeah, you know, and yeah, and so that was the point where I remembered I don't know if you're familiar with Jim Rohn.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so I remembered some old talks that I had listened from Jim Rohn, and he would say, for things to change, you need to change. And I knew that I obviously wanted things to change. I didn't want them to stay the same way. So I knew that I needed to make changes, right? So seeing the other side of what I was so afraid of, even if I lost my wife, I still knew that I was created for something more than where I was, right? And my wife, even if she decided she wasn't going to stay as my wife, and my children needed that best version of Hezron, right? That now, like, he had the open door to start fresh, start new, right?
So what were the initial steps to, the rudimentary stages to help you begin to create these new habits now that you have this newfound awareness and you're able to discuss it openly and you're feeling liberated? And of course, there's part of you that's also really hurting because you hurt other people. But what were the initial steps and what brought you out of this darkness into the light?
Yeah. So a couple of things, right? So first existential question for
Hmm.
me was, where am I with God? Where do I stand with God now? Right. But then for me personally, Lisa, like that's where this story of Jesus is so powerful, because for me, he's uh he's the reason why someone in shambles can come and be renewed, right? Um he's a reminder that someone that's so broken and so needy can come to the Heavenly Father and be restored, right? So first I had to realize that even though that was against the teachings, or it's not necessarily in line with the teachings of my particular church, right? Or my faith community. Um, again, because it's very conservative. So I lose my teaching privileges and
Uh-huh.
um like right away. I mean, because I confessed to the church too. I had told them what had been going on. Um Within like a couple of weeks, I first told my pastor, and then there was some stuff going on. This was like around pandemic time, so we were meeting through Zoom.
Right.
So I had to wait a little bit. But nonetheless, I did come clean with the church too. And so that was step number one. Step number two was also seeking. I remember a passage where Jesus is speaking about um, the the root of all things, good or bad. And the root of all things, good or bad, is our heart.
Mm.
So my heart wasn't in the best place, but remembering that passage, it reminded me that that's where I needed to work in order to know where I was and where I wanted to go, right? Like what had caused in my heart to end up where I was at that moment. So um so I seeked out a therapist, and God put I feel like he lined things up for the perfect person that I could open up to about everything, and really start investigating what was in my heart, right? Um, by this time, Lisa, I was a little bit over 30 pounds overweight.
Mm.
So per the BMI, numbers, I was like, I had just crossed the obesity line, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't where I wanted to be physically either, right? And I understood that all of this was a problem of the heart, right? But then I started also kind of understanding that there's there's multiple versions of us in our own minds, constantly, having different conversations, right? But there's only one true voice within us, right? I believe that's our soul, right? That's the one true voice is our soul. And my soul was telling me that God created me to be the best version of myself, right? To be able to display his power, his glory, right? Um, but then I started noticing all these other voices were like, well, what are you gonna do now? Because where you're at now, right? So I started noticing that voice. Oh, well, the easy route has always been porn. So that's an option, isn't it? Right?
Mm.
So what I noticed is that there was too many conversations in the mind. And so I started researching a little bit more about meditation. And uh, another name that I like to call it now, it's awareness exercises.
Mm-hmm.
Because what meditation allows us to do is basically to tune out all the voices. When you tune out all the voices, you get to hear your soul. You get
Mm, I
to
love
hear the one
that.
true voice, right? You get to hear the one true voice. And that voice, you empower it. You empower it during this time. And I combine this with prayer. And I learned how to empower that voice over all the other voices. Where where today, Lisa, and God and all the experiences that I've been, right? The habits of life, that I've accumulated over 30 plus years are all still there, right? So the voices come, but now I'm able to see it, and I'm like, I'm not gonna listen to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're not looking for the best version of me, right? So yeah, so um clinching onto my faith, seeking therapy, um, meditation or awareness exercises for me were super key. Fourth
Mm-hmm.
was now I needed now my body's obviously gonna miss a dopamine hit of everything, right? Like the pornography, and then the excitement of meeting with someone on a secret basis and all this other stuff, right? So where am I gonna get this? Well, um, me and my wife got enrolled into a CrossFit gym because it was the closest thing to
Yeah.
our house, and we started doing CrossFit. And that's when I started kind of diving into like what exercise and movement does to our body, and especially high intensity type of exercises, and how it creates the same chemical reactions in my brain and in my body that this other junk was creating, right? But now it's
Mm-hmm.
in a healthy way. And on top of that, Lisa, like I'm learning new things. I'm learning um that that there's smaller women with a smaller frame body than me that can pick up much more heavier weight than I can, right? So that starts hitting my ego in a different way, and I start noticing my ego a little bit more, and I start putting that on check, right? And I start also learning that life is truly a competition. But the competition is with no one else but yourself. The
100%.
comp the competition is to, at the end, the winner is the best version.
Hmm.
And when that best version of yourself is not the winner, then that's when you're losing. But it's not against your neighbor, it's not against your friend, it's not against your spouse, it's not against anybody but yourself, right? Those different voices.
Yeah.
Those are different versions of us, right? But what we need to learn how to be is in tune with the best version of ourselves. So, um, so exercise now provides a way for me to, like, in an exterior way, start seeing that competition against myself, right? Where if I start comparing myself to the people around the gym, man, like I'm not going back to that gym if a petite woman is lifting like much heavier than I am, you know? So I need to start paying attention to what is Hezron doing today and what can Hezron do next week, right? Can he beat his time? Can he do more weight? Can he better the exercise, the form, right? And all this starts creating patience, um, and virtues that we all wish we had sometimes. Well, they're
Hmm.
all available to us, right? And it's just seeking the best version of ourselves, right? So then I start noticing obviously changes in my body where I'm like, oh, I like this, right? Like I start noticing muscles again after so long. And then um, but you hit a plateau, right? So then what's causing that plateau? Well, then you start looking at um what we're eating, right? And that creates like a whole new experience because we start learning that what we feed our bodies uh, actually affects our minds in a very, very big way, right? And again, this to me just points to a creator, right? That in his mind, or to some might be her mind, um, to his mind, he had the best version of ourselves in mind,
Mm.
right? So he empowered us and he created us to be the best version of ourselves. This is through nutrition. This is through a holistic way, mind, body, and spirit, right? So, like our microbiome is going to determine our mood. That's crazy.
Hmm.
Like when I
That
when I
is
heard this,
crazy.
it was like, wait, what? You know, the microbiome is gonna help me pack on some of that more muscle. It's gonna help me become a better uh, lifter or whatever I'm doing, right? But yeah, it's an overall process, Lisa, that one thing after another started putting pieces together, started seeing how um really the best versions of ourselves is taking care of our entire selves. But the thing is that I wanted all those things from a long time ago. I've been like in love with personal development since I was like 18. Jim Rohn's like one of the first people that I heard when I
Yeah.
was like 18. So I was like, why hadn't all these changes happened before? And what I learned from my own experience is, again, what Jesus was talking about, it starts in the heart.
Mm.
We need a powerful, strong heart. And if we don't even know what's in our heart right now, that might be why we're so confused about where we need to go with our careers, why we're such bad health, why don't we have the relationships that we want to have. All of this stuff is because we're probably not even in tune with what's really in our heart right now, right? So that's the first step, is really facing what's in there right now. Uh, I read this quote and I misquoted like badly, uh, but I love my version, and it's something like the biggest monster or the biggest dragon that we need to face is in the cave of our own heart,
Mm.
and that's where the process starts. If we try to lose the weight, if we try to get the financial status that we want, whatever, and we look at it external, we're always going to end up in a place where we don't like. Even
Mhm.
though the numbers might look correct, even though the relationship might look correct, because everybody told us, me and my wife, all the time, we always heard, oh, you guys are such a beautiful couple. You guys make such a beautiful couple. Oh, you guys look like such a lovely couple. Oh, you guys look like you're so in love. They didn't know all the crap that was behind the doors, right? And that's how it can look. So it can look perfect, but it doesn't feel perfect. So if we work in the heart where we could feel perfect, all the external stuff is going to start kind of just getting in line with the heart.
That's so incredible. Your whole journey, your evolutionary process, everything you've been through. How long has it been now since you've been healed, so to speak? Like, have you stayed clean? And what is your relationship like now with your wife?
So it's been 3 years. It's been a little bit over 3 years. Um,
Congratulations.
and yeah, thank you. And I mean, when I met my wife, I admired her for all her traits, right? And unlike I might have let her down, she hasn't let me down. You know, I still admire her, like the strength that I want to have, like she has it, right? So that's helped me a lot, right? But but yeah, no what did you call it? No fallbacks. Thank God,
Okay.
you know? And again, that's because I know who I am. I know who I am. I know who I'm supposed to be. Like there's no doubt, right? But that comes through a lot of work, right? We don't get to there just realizing, right? Like that. Remember that verse that I told you that I encountered in Proverbs 28:13, right?
Mm-hmm.
The formula was confess. That obviously I did that, but then the deviating part, that's a lot harder than when someone might think because there's biochemistry. There's so that incorporates the body. There's a spiritual aspect of, like what do you do when you feel so much shame, like feeling like you're at rock bottom, right? Um, and then the mental aspect of the habit that before every time I would get into a conflict, like um, that was my resource to get out, right? Now, one beautiful thing about exercise is that when we feel angry, we can let the anger out in our exercise. Like
Mm-hmm.
the intention, like intention has a lot to do with everything that we do, right? So if we put the right intention into the exercise, at the end of the exercise, you can feel relief from that anger. And now I could come to my wife, not in an angry state, right? But I could talk about it. Like, hey, this did upset me. Like, thank God, like I got through the anger issue already, right? I let that out on the weights or on the jog or whatever, or yoga or whatever we choose to do, right? Um, I let it out there, like, but now we need to have this conversation, right? Like, did I misunderstand something? Where can we reconnect and make things right? So I can't speak enough about how important it is to know your true voice, who you really are, who you're meant to be, right? And as long as like we have a new day, Lisa, we get gifted a new day, it's an opportunity to figure that out, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so in this process, because I felt like a lot of more doors were shut on me afterwards, after coming clean, um, it it was hard. It was hard to be alone. I mean, my wife and I both just that's how we felt alone. Even though, speaking in the faith, right? We know that somebody's always with us, but just in community, like community is so important for us, right? Being able to open up to another person is super important to us as humans, just because our nature, right? We're social beings. Um, I and I couldn't shake off this desire to help people because that's always been in my heart. One way or another, help people reach their potential, the calling, um, be the best versions of themselves, right? So I knew that I couldn't do it necessarily in the church where I'm still at. Um, and there's a reason why I'm still there. Um, but so I got certified as a life coach, and that training was super helpful also to understand all the subconscious parts that's going on too, also through that whole process. Um, but the reason why I wanted to do it is because I wanted to be empowered to be able to help other men overcome this situation so that one, either they could prevent getting to the point where I got to, like creating so much pain for the person that you love the most in this world, or if they're there, help them both navigate through the rough waters because um yeah, it's a heck of a storm.
Yeah, I think your transformation has been amazing from just finding that greater level of awareness, surrendering, developing healthier habits, healthier outlets, developing the communication skills, and moving beyond people pleasing and setting boundaries with yourself, being able to release and feel your emotions and also speak to the people that are most important to you in your life and know that, like your emotions are valid, so you developed all these skills along the way, and now you're helping men in particular, obviously overcome the same issues. And there's a divine reason for it all. You've experienced this, you've healed this, you've, worked on your relationship, and now you're offering your gifts and insights so that other people too can come out of this place of addiction and find healthier outlets and, maybe even save their relationships potentially. So if you
Yeah.
could give just one general piece of advice, anybody who might think they have an issue, no matter what age they are, maybe they're not even aware it is an issue, and maybe we can do a future episode, like diving deeper into the specifics of what to look for, what the symptoms are, how to identify these issues, and just like the topic of addiction. But just for today, if you could, since we're almost out of time, just give one general piece of advice to anybody that might be struggling, I guess, with this specific addiction, even though it could apply to other addictions as well. Like, what insight can you offer, just general, like in the next minute or so?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So um life is hard. Like even in the Christian faith, I mean, I know a lot of people like to paint a pretty picture, right? But even in scripture, if we look at it, it's all hard. And it's never promised that in this life at least it's going to be any easier, right? We're going to find challenge after challenge after challenge because we don't grow without the challenges. You're not going to you're not going to get the best version at the end of yourself if you're not challenged, right? So all these diversions, they're the la la land that I call it, right? They just pull us out of reality, but it's not real. That's what we got to remember. It's not real and it doesn't fix the problem. You don't overcome the challenge by going into la la land, right? The only way that we overcome is by facing it and overcoming. And I think I'm a true testament that if you really want to, at the end, you'll come out strong, right? Because I was uh I was not courageous, right? On the contrary, pretty I was so scared telling my wife what I needed to tell her, right? Um I there were so many things wrong with the way that Hezron used to view the world. People pleasing, that was super important to me, like how you viewed me, right? Was super important to me. Now, I just want you to view the real me. And if you like me and we vibe, hey, that's awesome. And if we don't, then that's awesome too. Hopefully you get to connect with people that you do vibe with, right? But that's reality. So to the person that's thinks that this might not be a problem, it really is. And you need to get more informed about it, right? Because you're doing damage not only to your relationship, but to yourself. You're doing a lot more detriment than you really think, like on a physiological level, on a spiritual level, and a mental level. So there's a lot of things going on. You need to get informed, but you can overcome this, right? And and if we have a wife or a long-term girlfriend that really loves her partner that might be in this situation, I want to be able to also speak to her, Lisa, and say,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with you. You're not lacking anything. You are not the problem. You were never the problem. You might have your own problems, right? Because we all got to deal with them,
We all do.
right? But you're not the reason why he's recurring to this for an outlet. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not lacking one thing. You are beautiful. You are special. And that's why you're in his life, right? But the storm has to be dealt with, you know. The storm has to be dealt with.
Well, those are really wise words, and I hope people take that to heart. Before you tell the audience how they can connect with you, I like to end with the question for all my guests and to, just see your unique perspective. When you hear free flowing health, what does that mean to you?
Ooh, free flowing health. Um, Free flowing health. I think free flowing health is the health that we were created with, which is perfect. Perfect for us, right? It might not look perfect to someone else, but it's perfect for us. And that is mind, body, and spirit fully aligned. And it starts from within and it works its way out.
Ooh, I love that. Perfect.
Yeah.
So if there's a couple out there listening or a man any age who wants to connect with you or work with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So I'm actually trying to work on my podcast right now, and I do have a website up for the podcast. It's not out yet, but I'm in the works of it. It's called The Worst of These. So
Yeah.
theworstofthese.com, you'll be able to see my bio, and I think I have like one article up right now. But I'm working on it, and yeah, that's probably the best way on IG or Instagram. The worst of these podcasts is the way to find me. My TikTok handle is the same, the worst of these podcasts, and yeah, that'd be probably the easiest way to be able to connect with me. Hesron Gomez on Facebook.
And currently, are you taking on clients and working with them one-on-one? What does that process look like if somebody wanted to hire you as their coach or their mentor or just work with you in any capacity?
Yeah, so as a coach, I am taking on new clients. So Lisa, right now, it's I don't know how this works, right? It's like the synchronicities, right? Like they align however they're
Yeah.
supposed to align, right? But because now at this point I am wanting to transition the way that I'm providing for my family. I do have a business, but I'm wanting to transition to the coaching business to be like the primary way that I'm providing for my family. Um, I am taking on new clients, and it's, I would say, at a very discounted rate just because I'm working on courses to be able to minimize the cost too, because I want to make this as accessible as possible. And our time is something of high value that we need to learn also. So the way that we can minimize that is by creating these courses that can help people, right? Um, but I need the feedback. So right now it would
Yeah.
be the time to work with me. So you could get in at a very low financial cost, right? But what I'm telling some of my clients right now is like the financial cost might not be so costly, but the investment, the personal investment is huge, right? Because the work needs to be done.
That's beautifully stated. And thank you for being so real, raw, vulnerable, and sharing your story. I know a lot of people are going to listen to this and relate, maybe feeling some sort of shame or living their life in secrecy. And you're empowering them and giving them a voice by telling your story. So I truly appreciate you being able to do that and willing to do that. So anybody listening, please, reach out and know that you're not alone and that there is help available. Do you have any closing remarks?
No, that's it, Lisa. Thank you for this platform, to be able to share my story.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And everyone, have a great day. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Free Flowing Health podcast. Your support means the world to us. Help us grow by leaving a positive rating and review. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share this podcast. If you'd like to stay connected, you can find me on social media at Free Flowing Health or visit my website directly, freeflowinghealth.com. Wishing you a happy, healthy, and fulfilling life. Till the next time.
This podcast is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, health, or professional advice. We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast. This podcast is not intended to replace professional or medical advice. Views and opinions expressed by the guest are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the view of the host or the Free Flowing Health team.